Heavenly Father, today we put on the full armor to protect us against attack. We put on the belt of truth to protect against lies and deception. We put on the breastplate of righteousness to protect our hearts from the temptations. We put on the gospel of peace on our feet to walk in your light, peace and freedom with the Holy Spirit. We rebuke anxious thoughts. We take up your shield of faith for protection to block and destroy all the darts and threats thrown at us by the enemy. We put on the helmet of salvation to cover our minds and thoughts, reminding us that we are children of a mighty King. We are forgiven, set free, saved by the blood of Jesus. We take up the than any double-edged sword. We come to you, Lord, in prayer today. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen.
And just pray now for absolute clarity and conviction through us, God. I pray that you bring forth your truth and your will through what we're bringing to the table today, God. Because your word tells us that you anoint our head with oil, our cup overflows, and surely your goodness shall follow us for all the days of our life, forever and ever. And you prepare a table for us, God, in the presence of our enemies. So Lord, I pray now for redeeming fire to surround all of us throughout our discussion today. I pray that everything that is not of you breaks off and breaks apart and looses itself away from us. I pray for your sword of your word to come through us and resonate through us in what we're discussing today. I pray for angelic intervention to lift us up, lest we dash our foot upon a stone. And God, I pray that your Holy Spirit guide us throughout this discussion. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you guys so much. Okay, cool. It looks like we are Facebook Live. Just letting you guys know, we are broadcasting from Facebook also. Thank you, ladies, so much for those absolutely beautiful prayers. So you guys, thank you so much for tuning into the special emergency broadcast of the Imagination Podcast. I'm joined today by co-host of the Save Our Children podcast, Becky, who you guys know, she's been on many times and we just love her and I'm so grateful she's here. And this week we're doing an urgent emergency broadcast podcast featuring 2 survivors and ongoing victims of human trafficking and government abuse in the UK, Serenity Rose and Rachel Caruso. Because of this emergency status on the situation, we decided to halt everything we had originally planned and broadcast this story far and wide in hopes we can get resources for these 2 amazing women. Prepare to be shocked by what you hear. I'm going to let these 2 women tell a little bit about their story for context, and we'll be getting right into the emergency situation of today. If you haven't yet seen Serenity's episode on the imagination, I'm going to link it below for your reference. And we'll also be uploading Rachel's series to my channel soon as well, so you can hear her whole story. In the meantime, she whistleblows all the things on her own YouTube channel, and I'm going to have a couple other interviews she's done recently that have more context to her story linked below also for you guys to check out. And all that I ask is that I really need help distributing this episode far and wide and into as many ears, eyes, and hands as possible. And I'm so thankful for all the support and love you guys on the other end of the screen, phone, and computer continuously give me. Please definitely see the show notes in the description, no matter what platform you're on. I'm going to have a lot of really key links for you guys to tap into from this episode, and then to connect with Rachel, to connect with Serenity, and then also the Save Our Children podcast, of course. And you guys will get ways that you can directly help support human trafficking victims in real time. Without further ado, I'm honored to reintroduce and introduce to you today my co-host Becky from the Save Our Children podcast and ongoing human trafficking victims, Epstein survivors, relentless victors, my dear friends, and voices for the voiceless, Serenity Rose and Rachel Caruso. Thank you, ladies, so much for being here with me today.
Thank you for having us. Thank you for your support and assistance with this.
Oh, absolutely. I am so sorry for everything that you're going through. And I wanted to use this week as an opportunity to bring awareness to this. I obviously care about you guys, and you guys deserve and need all the resources you can. As people listening will hear, this is a dire situation. This is an urgent emergency. At the same token, I thought it would be a great opportunity to talk about what survivors and victims go through on a daily basis, because this isn't something that is normally talked about on the show. The after, you know, as an adult, what do you go through after you've been victimized and abused as a child in these systems? So why don't we start, Rachel, Serenity, why don't we give a brief intro on your background, and then we will tailor the conversation to bring us to how you guys connected today and where we're at.
Who wants to start? So my background is that I'm a trafficking survivor from childhood, going on and until adulthood, and even now. However, the situation is not as clear cut as what some people might, you know, externally believe to be the case, because I'm now currently experiencing direct trafficking through the UK government, under the guise of social services and protection and care. But what they're actually doing is restricting my movements and continuing to put me under coercive control, essentially. So, I mean, I can take you through like a brief timeline of that if you want to. I mean, I'm not really sure like where to start.
Yeah, if you want to just give some bullet points on things, we can obviously, as we're talking about what's going on today, we can talk about more things that you find relevant, but a timeline or some points is absolutely, go ahead.
Yeah, so in childhood, I experienced DV. I'm a grooming gang survivor as well, sexual abuse survivor. I was overtly, directly trafficked by a gang from my teenage years up until my mid-20s, when I escaped the overt trafficking, the conscious, you know, clear-cut trafficking that everyone kind of understands to be trafficking. I then was forced into a situation of destitution. I had to present as homeless to the UK government to enable me to obtain housing. And through that process, I've then just repeatedly been put into situation after situation that has reinforced and forced homelessness over and over again, which has now led to what's currently happening with social services. So essentially, I disclosed historical trafficking to a housing officer at the time, who then fraudulently put in a report of current sex trafficking to the police. So she committed perjury by putting in this false report. She knew it not to be true. My actual job that I was doing at that time, and have done for a number of years, was within the third sector in anti-trafficking. I actually offered lived experience consultancy around that to try and bridge the systemic gaps that survivors were falling through constantly, because there's just no support. So essentially what happened was, from this false referencing of current sex trafficking, I'm now for almost a year now being subjected to this fraudulent child protection case, where my history is being used as a leverage to coercively control me. I've been told repeatedly that social services will take me to court if I return to my country of origin to see my family and friends. Every time I move anywhere or do anything outside of a predictable pattern of behavior, I'm being accused of being sex trafficked against all evidence, against the fact that I've engaged with them now for nearly 12 months. I've had the police at my door threatening me. It's just, the levels to it are just horrific and completely insane, how they're able to even create this narrative. It just examples that there is no real law of protection when it comes to trafficking survivors in general, and that's exploited to keep us under control.
100%. And it's so devastating because it's this web. People have a hard time understanding how all these things connect. You know, it's like one of these things seems impossible, and then you guys see the bigger picture of how it's all interwoven together, and trying to explain that to people can be very confusing for people to understand, like what's put in place to keep you in these systems. And Rachel, you have a crazy web around your story too. And I know, you know, your story is so in depth and probably hard to condense, but give people listening a little background and context on your story also.
So I was born into MK Ultra and satanic ritual abuse, born to an Illuminati bloodline. I grew up in a seemingly like nothing town to a nobody family, but it was actually part of the cover for the elite connections. So it's MK Ultra is by definition human trafficking, and there's various ways that trafficking manifests. All of my family were and are perpetrators. So I have just grew up with no safe person, still don't have any safe contacts. And I grew up in a very abusive home, but so much of the abuse was kind of hidden with the programming, like the sexual abuse, all of that blocked out because it was so traumatic. I couldn't have coped with it if I knew, I couldn't cope day to day if I knew. When I was in my mid 20s, actually over my 25th birthday, I had a spontaneous spiritual awakening, which led me on a path of really deep, swift healing for a solid year. And then I awoke to my MK Ultra programming, meaning that I remembered that it had happened. I didn't even have the language for it at first, but I knew it was government mind control. And so memories started to come back specifically to that, and obviously continues. So in that year where I was healing, I was inducted into Teal Swan's New Age cult. Teal Swan is not who she presents herself to be. She was, in fact, one of my main abusers and programmers throughout life. She's about 5-6 years older than me, and has always had that evil inclination. So I was inducted into her New Age cult while I was still asleep to my programming. And then in 2015, whenever I awoke to my programming, I was basically I was distancing myself from them. And then eventually they really aggressively ousted me because I was speaking about my experiences, which involved sex abuse from other members in the cult. And so Teal Swan's cult actually ended up trafficking me out of the US in the fall of 2015 to Europe. Starting at the starting point was allegedly just to attend one of her workshops in France. So I was trafficked to France, and then Romania and Greece and the UK, all by Teal Swan's cult had involvement in all of that. So at the time, it looked like I was making my own choices. I didn't realize that it was a cult and an Illuminati cult. And I've always struggled with destitution and homelessness since I fled my abusive family at age 18. And that is I think it'll come up in our discussion today, that is engineered, and it's engineered to enable the cycle of trafficking, because you're always in desperate situations, you're always vulnerable. And when you're a targeted individual, everything is obstructed and you're isolated. So plenty of legitimate support is cleared out of your reality, and false support, perpetrators disguised as angels, are targeted or targeting you. But to kind of quickly finish up my experiences, which are ongoing to today, I was in the UK. I was basically getting stuck in these foreign countries because I didn't have the money to do anything. I wasn't eating. I could barely house myself in hostels. And so because of that, I ended up reaching out to a UK charity while I was in the UK because they said they offered free supports. And that was connected to what's called the National Referral Mechanism in the UK, shortened to NRM. That is a government scheme which claims that it provides nominal support to identified victims of trafficking only while their data, their information about their experience is collected, allegedly to combat the crime of human trafficking. So I ended up being inducted into the NRM without my informed consent, and then coerced through setups basically and false information and withholding information. I was then coerced into the charity safe houses that are hired under the NRM. So these are government paid charity and religious charity safe houses. And I was in 2 different safe houses for about a year and a half, horrifically abused. Turns out it's all a scheme for trafficking itself. That's it. It's not that it's been corrupt, it's that it was fraudulent from the start. And I also experienced MK Ultra reprogramming attempts in the safe houses function as prison camps. And then the NRM system coerced me into claiming asylum in the UK, which functions a lot like the NRM. They overlap in a lot of ways. And that has been used to traffic me as well. And now I'm stuck in limbo in the asylum system because the Home Office, which is the UK government, which runs the asylum, obviously, excuse me, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thoughts. The Home Office, I reported abuse in the asylum accommodation and the safe houses to them, and I persisted on it, and they eventually broke all contact with me because of that. So everything that they're legally required to do for me in the asylum system, they have just ignored, which means that I'm undocumented. I'm not here illegally, but I'm undocumented. So they can alter that narrative to their whim, on a whim, whatever will fit their agenda. And so I applied for asylum in October 2018, haven't had contact from the Home Office since December 2018. They confiscated my ID. They're withholding my asylum ID. So I exist without an ID and with the asylum system, all my rights are stripped from me inherently. And then everything that I'm supposed to be afforded in the asylum system, those rights are even omitted from my life. So hopefully that kind of summarizes things. And I apologize if that was long-winded. As you said, it's complex, and so is Serenity's, but she may have done a better job briefing it.
No, thank you guys both so much for that. And I want to make a point here as well that trafficking, yes, is what we think it is. It's the abuse, it's the bringing you away, it's doing all that stuff, but it also involves not giving you a path, taking your ID away, not being able to get you out of a place, not being able to find yourself a place to live. Those are the things that also are included in trafficking. And that happens often, like, oh, I have a really cool job over here for you. Just give me your passport for the next year. And now you're stuck here doing whatever it is. This is the same sort of thing that these ladies are going through, that I think it's really important to mention, that they already went through the trafficking in the way that we all kind of think trafficking, and now it's continuing with their daily lives over and over and over. And I'm actually so glad to see you guys together, that you have somebody there with you to help and rely on. How did you guys get together? How did you find each other and kind of assist each other?
Yeah, like I just wanted to make a really quick comment before I forget about the definition of trafficking, because I'm so glad you brought that up. Because yeah, like this is actually part of the mechanism of control that is being used in my case and many other people's cases, is that there's this feigned ignorance by professionals of what trafficking is. So they say, oh, trafficking, that means being moved from one place to another. No, it comes under the remit of modern slavery. And the definition of modern slavery is exploitation obtained by means of duress, coercion, fraud, deception, deceit, or force. There are a number of variables. And so that is actually applicable in so many different ways, you know, so there's different methods of which trafficking is used. So it's really important to talk about that. And also,
Can I add something to that definition?
yeah.
So it's as she said, it's the harbor receipts, transfer
Yeah,
of a
harboring,
person
yeah.
under the methods that she outlines for the purpose of exploitation, for benefits or for gain. And gain can be, it's not just monetary, it can even be personal benefits. And I think something that is kind of missing from everyone's understanding is that if somebody is exploiting you, there is inherently gain in that, whether it's just personal benefit. So I think that gets overlooked a lot. It's like, oh, it has to be about money. There's usually money involved in some way, but it's not like a simple transaction, like a clean transaction. Even if somebody is benefiting from it personally, that's trafficking. If you're being exploited, if there's harbor receipt or transfer of a person for intended exploitation, that's trafficking.
Yeah,
What were you gonna say?
completely. And also, like what you're saying about the gain, like there's different means of gain. It can be a monetary gain, it can be a social standing. You see that often a lot with traffickers, especially the grooming gang model, in that some grooming gang perpetrators, they don't even receive any money for it, but they receive status and hierarchy in their system. And you see this echoed in professionals, actually. In social service, corrupt social services, you see the same echoes as the grooming gang model, you know, and so it's really important to highlight that point as well. But back to the original question, how we connected was actually through your disclosures of the NRM, because at the time when Rachel's whistleblowing channel was talking about the NRM, that was just at the same time where I was almost inducted into a safe house. And thank God I came across Rachel's channel and I started to look at her content, and I thought, wow, someone's actually talking about a really similar experience to what I've had, because I was under the NRM too. I didn't go into any of the safe houses. That, like, it was in large part my own intuition, but I think that given the amount of external environmental control that was around me, I could have very well fell into it if it wasn't for Rachel's prior disclosures, because that gave me the confirmation of, okay, this is really unsafe. I'm definitely not going down that route. Because of course I was dealing with constant homelessness, engineered homelessness, essentially happening over and over again. And I was under the NRM as part of process of the homelessness application system in the UK. You're positioned to constantly prove yourself worthy of any kind of housing. So they basically, it's a way of breaching GDPR as well. They ask for more and more and more and more information. It's the thin end of the wedge. So it pushed me to then go under the NRM to prove that, yes, I am a trafficking survivor. Now will you help me? And then I still wasn't given any help. I was made what's known as intentionally homeless in the UK, which is ridiculous because I was fleeing my situation. And yeah, it's essentially, I was told by the NRM charity that was working with me, you know, we can help you out of this situation. You can go into a safe house, but you would be taken in the middle of the night. We won't tell you where you're going. You can't bring all your belongings with you. And I was just, my response was, this is incredibly similar to a trafficking scenario. You know, that feels really obscene and strange to come from a charity to say such a thing, you know. And it was with that led me to Rachel's content.
And goes to show that, like, your voice matters. Like, she's the only other person who I've encountered who can also speak to the abuse in the NRM. So I'm grateful that it helped one person, because I mean, you just never know. So that's why it's so important to share your truth and your wisdom.
I completely agree. And like I said, for people who haven't connected with Rachel on her YouTube, please check out all the links below and check out Serenity's full testimony too that she did with me, and all the other links that they're going to provide, because these stories really are interwoven. And the interesting thing for me is seeing how two perfect strangers meet. And this happens, it's not just you two, it's other survivors that are in our circle. It's other survivors that you guys have in your circles that I don't know how many overlaps there are between these stories, and it's very fascinating because I feel, having done interviews with a lot of survivors, and I'm sure Becky can attest to this, there's a deep feeling of loneliness and isolation, and nobody else understands what I'm going through. I have to be alone because there's nobody else that even believes me out there that I'm trying to tell. And it really goes to show that there's a reason they're trying to keep you guys stifled. They don't want this information getting out, because that's all that it does take, is for one person to hear and say, wait a minute, that same thing I can relate to. That's happened to me, or I'm connected to that same person, or I was born in that same place, or I know people by that last name. And both of your stories have so many different overlaps, which is fascinating and horrific at the same time. And I know that that's the case with a lot of the girls that we've brought into our circle that we talk to. For you guys, how does those two stories of what you guys have been through, how did you guys start connecting, and what are some of those overlaps that you guys found in your own stories besides the NRM?
Well, we've obviously both had some really similar experiences that overlap with the NRM, and I've also been in the refuge system, the women's refuge system, and it's a very similar paradigm of coercive control, really. Coercive control by professionals who are supposed to be there to help you, who are supposed to be providing a safety net, but that safety net is not what it seems. And large part because another avenue to explore as well is the data, the way that these mechanisms are essentially used as a huge data grab opportunity, and that data can then be interceded potentially by perpetrators within government. So my case, I have known perpetrators who work in local government, also ex-police officers, known perpetrators, yet I'm constantly having to defend my right to my data not being constantly shared everywhere through multi-agencies. And I'm gaslit constantly, into this of like, oh, why are you asking for so much? And I think that like, would I be right in saying that's like a common overlap in that data is like constantly used?
I mean, that's why they have government systems, so that they can have your data.
That's what it's exactly, that's what it's there for. And you'll see as well, the pattern is that once you start pushing back on your data rights, the coercive control from government agencies and from the government in general becomes worse. It gets really more overt. So, my case, it was kind of more distant. And then as soon as I started pushing back on my GDPR rights and saying, well, actually, no, I want to have this data restricted. I don't want multi-agencies, all of a sudden, social services were involved. And there was this huge dossier of all of my data being shared with every area I've ever lived in, where there's known perpetrators. I've disclosed to them, I have perpetrators in this area. You're just, wishy-washy giving this data away of everything, of disclosures that I've said as well, so there's like, I think that's common for all survivors actually, and common for anyone, is that like our data is constantly used against us. It's constantly used as a mechanism of control. And also obviously we have overlaps with Epstein too, which we didn't know initially. We didn't know that we had that overlap. I mean, for me personally, I have been deliberately withholding from remembering anything to do with Epstein. When it came out, I was so triggered by it that I didn't even look at the news at all. Like, I didn't want to see it, but it became so big and so just constant that I couldn't actually avoid looking at it. So it forced me to confront my memories. And then it was kind of like this collective, organic situation where we had a discussion about it, and it came to light that we were both survivors of Epstein.
And we had similar experiences coming to terms with it. Similar in, it's a PTSD. PTSD can manifest as avoidance. So like I didn't look at anything in the news. I avoided it, and then had very, very vivid but brief flashbacks. Like the memories that were coming to me were in snapshots, but very vivid and visceral in my body. But more to how we came together to discover all of these connections is really, it was just online. Serenity contacted me and said, I've heard what you're saying about the NRM, and I was in the NRM. I almost went to a safe house, and then just over time connecting more and more. And I think it's like in the past 6 months, maybe as things kind of escalated for both of us. And we were just kind of pushed to like, well, we have to find support, like just pushed to speaking out more and finding support. And so we were connecting with other whistleblowers or just people who are in the disclosure community, who we resonated with, such as yourselves. And then just that's created like a collaboration of and even a focused collaboration that we organized for a whistleblower alliance. And just having like a lot of boundaries and structures to how we can come together in a safe way to share our experiences and to corroborate things and to investigate and research. And so much has come to light throughout the past few months. And to the Epstein elements, we didn't, we weren't broadcasting our experiences with anyone. And I think that's really common, especially for like if you're an MK Ultra survivor like myself. I didn't have these memories. They weren't retained in my mind until they were recovered. And it's not like I have a lot at this point even. So I can't prove it. I can speak to some specifics, which could probably be corroborated with other survivors, but I don't have physical evidence is the thing. So but it's an important part to highlight because it also plugs into all of our experiences, the government trafficking, the childhood abuse, and mind control. Everyone is really focused on Epstein, but also let's not forget that's really just a drop in the bucket of this abuse that is happening worldwide and with ourselves as well. Like you'll notice like Epstein isn't really our focal point because it's, for me at least, there's been worse abusers.
Yeah. And it's so key, to collaborate as survivors, because the way that PTSD will work, or any kind of dissociation would work, because I know some survivors, they have DID, but it's all on a spectrum, is that the memories literally get pushed down into the subconscious brain. They don't go away, but they get pushed into the hippocampus, which is a part of the brain that stores them. And it takes a number of years. In some instances, they never come back. They never resurface. And another thing is that we have to, as survivors, feel safe for those memories to resurface, because otherwise they just keep getting pushed down. So when we do collaborate, yes, I might only have one small piece of the puzzle, but somebody else has something else that corroborates it, and then you look at the circumstantial evidence and you go, oh, okay, well, this makes sense. And it also takes you out of the gaslighting that any survivors get put through of doubting yourself, doubting your experiences, because it does come from a very emotional center of the brain. It's not the same memory processing as like, oh, you know, for example, today I ate something for lunch and I can remember it was this, this, and this. That's the cognitive part of the brain. But when you're processing emotional memories, they can come back as different types of flashbacks. So it might come back as only a visual flashback, but detached from the emotional part, or only the emotions, but no visual, you know, or only the auditory. And this is why it's so difficult for us to do on our own. And why when we do come together, like so much comes to light, and then more of the memories start to come back.
And I appreciate you guys highlighting that, because I think too, going back to even what you guys were saying about the definition of trafficking, the majority of people, I think, believe trafficking is just this violent act where it's very obvious what it is. It happens only to children or to certain people. And then once they're not being trafficked in that violent way, that's obvious, then it's done. And then healing takes place and your life is all good and you can forget about it and move on. And there's such a different story, even with survivors that do find luck in either maybe winning in court or successfully getting away from their perpetrators and not being bothered anymore and being able to get married and have kids and some type of stability. You know, it's like you said, a memory could come 20 years after their first memories are recovered and all of a sudden just hit them out of nowhere. You know, somebody could come out of the woodwork and start gang stalking them. There's all sorts of ways that targeting happens and that resources are pulled. This network, they work so hard. They've worked so hard to keep you guys in the system. It's a liability for them whenever you get out. You know, they've done so much to make sure that those memories were stored so deep down inside that you could just keep going on with life, being a slave to them and have no idea, right? I'd love for you guys to talk a little bit about like what does a survivor go through once they, and I know that this is ongoing for you guys. I don't ever believe survivors actually leave. I think you're always victims in some type of way. Even if you survive what you did, the hardest things, there's still so many hard things that you're victimized for going forward. But what are the consequences of leaving this system? What are the consequences of going public with your story and the different ways that you're targeted?
I think that it happens in two ways. So you have like the organic response to leaving, which is a process of healing. You know, initially when someone comes out of victimization, it's like that. I can't remember where I read it, but I read it somewhere where it said, you know, if you are in that state of mind where you have been constantly victimized, you actually emit an energy. And so you could have one person in a huge field, you know, full of 1 million people, and one victim and one perpetrator, and they would find each other because they pick up on each other's energy. It's like a spike. So you kind of go through that organic response where you do have these repeat scenarios that happen of re-victimization, which are natural because the trauma hasn't been processed and it remanifests itself. But on the other end of it, you have deliberate attempts by perpetrators within systems who do on purpose set you up to be re-traumatized because it serves a purpose to push the memories down. Of course, it intimidates you, it gaslights you, it makes you question your reality because it's so hard, especially when you first come out, to discern the links within the network of perpetrators, you know, as to who has done what part of it is speculation, what part of it is, you know, definitive and certain. But the more clarity that you have, the more it exposes itself. You know, it's like any investigation, any, you know, investigator within the police would apply the same techniques, you know, of elimination, essentially, until you get to a point where it becomes really clear. You know, they show themselves for who they are through their patterns of behavior. And then you can link, you know, who coincides with who, and I mean, that's how corruption works anyway. You know, it's hidden, but you do see the patterns.
And the point is that it's organized abuse. So that means that it's way more than one perpetrator, and it's highly coordinated. So it's not just random, like, okay, we've got a bunch of people go do random stuff to victimize this target. It's very coordinated and strategic and tailored to the individual, their vulnerabilities, their current needs, their current goals, and current programming or brainwashing, whatever level of, we all have a level of programming. And then of course with MK Ultra survivors, that's at the maximum. And so that's one element of the gang stalking and organized abuse, but it goes beyond just trying to trigger you. It's an attempt to destroy your life. So, like, it's organized abuse, what's going on with Serenity and her child with social services and housing. So that's her home, that's her child, that's her family. So it's not like just harassment, like, oh, we're making your day hard. It's destroying your life. And for me, and there's so many ways that everything is obstructed for you. So we don't have human and civil rights. I mean, inherently, we do. Our rights are inborn, they come from God. But how the average person envisions a person in the UK or in the US living life and the rights that they're afforded, that doesn't exist for us. We live in a completely different world. So the law is manufactured for us. It's made up at the whim of whatever will suit the agenda to obstruct and destroy us. And so it is also, it's attempted murder is how I class it, because they are trying to kill you, whether it's even trying to drive you to suicide. If somebody intentionally tries to drive you to suicide, that is murder. So it is at least a slow kill program, and that can be let's say fast tracked or more intense for different people. But you're living with basically attempted murder every day.
It's interesting because I recently was watching a documentary on Eastern Germany and Stasi techniques of how they targeted dissidents, and I have no reason to believe that this just suddenly stopped. From a government perspective, from a power dynamic perspective, there is literally no motivation to just go, oh, there's all of this great intelligence that we've obtained, let's just leave it there, because governments are about control. Nobody can deny that is the reason why they exist, is to control the population, whether people want to believe that it's for the right reasons or not. It's the power structure that exists. So from East Germany, when they had the Stasi rule, these are exactly the same kind of techniques and tactics. And there was actually an ex-Stasi officer that was speaking on this who said that's the intention. It's actually not even murder. The intention is to murder the soul.
Which is a type of murder.
Because they want the individual to either commit suicide, be institutionalized, or imprisoned. Either of these outcomes serves a purpose to silence whistleblowers and dissidents. And also, I just want to talk about the UK in particular. There was a law that came out, I'm not sure, it was maybe about 2 or 3 years ago, I'm not sure exactly when, but it was Theresa May's government that brought it out. They nicknamed it the Snoopers Charter. People can go and look this up. When this came out, it was an open door to labeling anybody who disagreed with the government as a terrorist. The definition for terrorist was adjusted. So if you post on your social media, for example, that you disagree with the government for whatever reason, you could potentially be placed on a list. Also, to coincide with that, under Tony Blair's cabinet, under Tony Blair's government, he extended the Regulatory Investigatory Powers Act, which means that any local authority have basically free reign now, because the definition is so vague, to spy on individuals. And there's been many cases that have been highlighted in tribunals where citizens have been spied on for really, really minuscule minor reasons. One of them was a lady who had an Investigatory Powers Act open on her. She was taken pictures of, she was under surveillance because they thought she lied about a catchment area for a school. So this is the level of control and surveillance that the government openly implement. It's public record. You can go and research the laws for yourself. So 100%, you know, when we're talking about targeted individuals, or however you want to define it, it's not that far-fetched or some kind of conspiracy that this is happening. It's quite a natural flow of how politics has worked.
Do you want to talk about your experience with the investigation?
Yeah, so just bringing it back to my experiences with social services in relation to the Investigatory Powers Act, in that I've actually done a subject access request. I have all of the information at my disposal of how this happened with social services in my case. And this one housing officer who put in a fraudulent report of current sex trafficking, alcohol use, drug use on the property that I was on in the temporary accommodation. All of this she had zero evidence for. There was actually cameras outside the property, so she could have obtained evidence if this was true, but of course she didn't have any because it wasn't true. I believe that through her constant phone calls, which I have evidence of through my subject access, to the police, to Child Protective Services, to various other agencies, she then must have triggered an Investigatory Powers Act on me, because when I first moved to this area where I made this disclosure, where this all kicked off, I had police parked up in marked vehicles, they weren't unmarked, outside my property for hours and hours on end. And this was in a rural area. I wasn't in a city. I wasn't in an area where it was commonplace for these kind of things to be happening. I didn't live in any kind of block of flats where that would be a common occurrence. And this was happening pretty much on a daily basis. They were parked outside, surveilling me. I would go into, more commonly it would happen if I went into certain grocery shops. So if I went into the big name grocery shops, within approximately 20 minutes of being in that shop, I would come out and there would always be a police car parked up outside, just sitting there, not doing anything, just watching me. And then as soon as I would leave, they would leave. And it's not just because this happened once, it was because it was constantly happening almost on a daily basis. I had one incident where I deliberately took a bus even more to a rural area on purpose, just to see, am I just, you know, thinking that this is happening? Is this just a coincidence, or is this really happening? And a police car basically tailgated the bus that I was on, and then as I got off, it drove past and turned around and went back. And it wasn't until I did the subject access that all of this started to make sense, because at the time I'm thinking, you know, what's going on? I haven't done anything wrong. Why would I have the police surveilling me? That doesn't make any sense. But now in hindsight, when I look back, I realize, oh, it's because she's put in this fraudulent report. But it's like a double-edged sword, because apparently she was concerned that I was being trafficked. But at that same time, the police came and done a welfare check, and I was accused of being part of a trafficking ring. Despite my disclosures of historical trafficking, I also disclosed corruption within the police. I disclosed corruption within a local authority, and you know, I'm then having them turn up at my house accusing me of being part of some supposed trafficking ring. And now it makes sense to me, because the remit for her to open up at RIPA would be that I would be deemed as a risk to the public, right? So she has probably said, oh, we don't know if this person's part of a trafficking ring, and that would meet their vague threshold. But it leads you to question, how much evidence is required to open this up on an individual? It must be next to nothing. So it just takes one corrupt professional to raise this on anyone. And they can spy on you, they can take pictures of you, they can send people who pose as neighbors to spy on you and to engage with you to obtain information. They can then open up a further investigation. They have to have like a secondary contract or agreement to do it. But if they want to, or if they choose to, they can then hack your devices and intercept your communications. You just basically have no privacy, which then leads you to question, well, is the Human Rights Act actually even working in practice if this is happening and it's so commonplace? You know, what happened to my rights to a private family life? What happens to my rights to freedom of expression, thought, and belief if I'm being targeted in this way just from expressing that I was a survivor of historical sex trafficking?
Yeah, I mean, so that's like, just she gave you one example of the targeted abuse, and it brings us basically to where we are today too. I mean,
I'd love for, because it's still, you guys are now being targeted together. I'd love for you to talk about what's going on right now.
but we were each, targeted in our own situations,
Yeah.
and we brought ourselves together. So
Right.
thus the targeting has
Exactly right.
come together. But like for me, I don't have any ID. I'm not allowed to work. Like, I'm legally prohibited from working in the UK. Plus, without an ID, you wouldn't be able to get work. So without an ID, people take for granted everything that they take for granted. Having an ID, you don't realize how much you need it for. Like, you can't even get a storage rental units without an ID. So you can't get a job, you can't rent a home. So you basically have to live like a criminal, which puts you in a vulnerable situation. I've had mob attacks from basically, like, the main access point for me is landlords who are in fact traffickers, and so I'm funneled into them, and all of my other options are omitted, and I'm funneled into them. Some of them were my traffickers in childhood, even in the US, and here we are in the UK.
And this is through Airbnb, right? Like, Airbnb is corroborating with traffickers. They're trafficking through Airbnb, which is horrifying. That's something I don't think a lot of people realize is happening.
Yeah, Airbnb is included in it, but even before Airbnb, in my experience, it was just private renting landlords in the UK. But I had to turn to Airbnb. I had to rely on Airbnb because the one ID I had expired, and then so the trafficking through the housing just continued with Airbnb. And it's the company too. It's not just like perpetrators operating, like hiding in Airbnb. Airbnb itself is corrupt, and they are coordinated with these individuals, which has been so thoroughly proven in my experiences. And so, like, Airbnb hosts would, yeah, like for example, one recently, Akil Varinda, had incited a mob attack on everything that I use to support myself to survive, which is quite limited given the whole being held captive in limbo in the asylum system. So my Airbnb was restricted. The way I access money, that was blocked. So they almost tried to shut down they did try to shut down my GoFundMe. They almost did that. There was something else that they reported me to every platform I rely on to survive in these dire circumstances, and managed to shut down half of them. And so now I am even more reliant on other people, which is a very difficult way to live. So, and it also strips me of my independence, my autonomy, and can put me at risk if I trust the wrong person. Because that's the cycle. That's what I was talking about, the cycle of trafficking. So your destitution is engineered, everything, your resources are obstructed. So you're vulnerable and desperate. And then there's targeting, and so many legitimate resources are pushed out of your reality. And so you're basically forced to rely on that person and just pray to God that it will work out kind of okay. And in my case, it's been a mix, but mostly not okay. More recently, right now, it's a little bit different. Like Serenity and I have coming together. It's not like we're both dealing with different circumstances, which are dire, so different needs. So it's not like two people who are being trafficked, like it's not like we can it's not like we can do so much for the other. We're like just doing what we can. So it is, it is important that we have connected, but it's not like the solution.
Right.
We're still barely keeping our heads above water.
And I think too, go ahead, Becky. I think you're
Oh.
gonna say something.
Well, and I wanted to bring up a point when we were talking about the government earlier, just to step back for a second, and the programming. And you had made a comment like we're all programmed, and you're absolutely right. They continue to tell us, I'll say us, like the non-traffic people, that what you've gone through is wrong, is fictional. We shouldn't believe you. We shouldn't help you. You are in the wrong side. And what I've said repeatedly, if you listen to Emma's podcast, if you listen to our podcast, if you've been part of this for any amount of time, you will see the similarities in many of your stories. So how do you now have a fictional story that goes beyond boundaries of a location, that go beyond decades and generations of people, that go beyond religion or gender or socioeconomic class? It targets everyone, and the story is the same or similar. And we sit here and we hear, oh, well, I watched a movie once where that happened, so that can't be true. And so they program us, not equally, I'll never say equally, but they program us to target you so that people don't help you. Because, well, that's not true. I saw it in a Jason Bourne movie. Like, that's not obviously what happened. Wait, what? They're telling you.
Conspiracy theory.
Right. It's a conspiracy theory. I actually talked to a coworker once. She's like, I read a story where this girl was brought on a boat over from this country to this country. And I was like, that's not a story. I mean, like, you might have read it as a story, but that is actually how it happens. But they now want you to believe it's a fiction story that this author just concocted in his head. No. And so we've got to start being really aware as well that this stuff is happening. And it doesn't end, like Emma said, it doesn't end when you become an adult. And it doesn't end because you dealt with it here and now you've worked through therapy, you're all healed and everything's great. That's not how it works. And we really truly have to start coming together as a group, as believers and truth tellers, because again, like you said, you two can come together, but we need to help you to be able to make your circle bigger and be able to help, because you, like you said, you can't help her and she can't help you monetarily. And so we need to be able to step in there and really be able to help you guys and others listening to our live and we're listening to the podcast in the future. This is why it's an emergency broadcast. We really want people to understand that this is dire. You guys are really in a dire position, and we want others to really be able to step up and help you.
Well, and that's the thing too. It's people don't realize also the coercion that goes on beyond whenever you get out, all the steps that are in place to try to drag you back in. And if you resist that, how powerful people are capable of denying you your civil rights, your IDs, your privacy, and that it's done deliberately to reel you back in, to bleed you dry of your resources, to make sure you can't get a job. Any way that they can circle back and get you to rely on them again, they're going to do that because it's a liability for them. If you're thriving and you're making a ton of money and you're able to buy resources and bring awareness and meet people, and that's also, I think, hard for people to understand that perspective, because it's made to look like these are the good guys these are the people you shouldn't believe. And if you want to help, donate to this nonprofit because they're legit. They have a nonprofit, they're a business. Look at all these shiny faces, right? And that's the other part where we go wrong as a society. I know so many people that pride themselves on donating, especially these days, the last few years, I've seen so many people. I'm donating to this human trafficking organization. I'm donating to this human trafficking nonprofit, right? And for me, I'm sitting here screaming, donate to the survivor. They need it. You don't know where this money goes. You don't even know if any of it ends up getting it to a survivor, much less a small percentage of what you're actually donating. It's going to funnel the human traffickers' pockets so they have more resources and so they can control the people that they're supposed to be giving the money to, right? And
So
so
I'm literally paying for like when you're donating to a charity, most of the time you're literally paying for trafficking. You're supporting trafficking. I mean, I learned that very thoroughly in the NRM and the asylum system, because they're both largely ran by charities. And like most of the established support for victims of all kinds of abuse, including but not limited to human trafficking, is fraudulent. It's not even just corrupt. It was fraudulent at the start. And as you said, like you will be a target for life, but like the people who have lived through it, such as us. And so legally, by definition, you are still a victim. There's like this war about victim versus survivor. Well, let's just acknowledge, like, you might be a victor within you, but legally, if it's still happening to you, you are a victim. You're definitely a target. To be honest, I lost my train of thought because I wanted to comment more on what you said, but
okay, we were just talking about just the targeting. They try to really bleed you dry, and how Becky said, they program the general public to say, don't believe survivors, don't donate to them, donate to the nonprofits, trust these people who are in charge, we're taking care of it, and meanwhile, your stories are getting stifled. Go ahead.
Well, I remembered what I wanted to say. People are very passive in their idea of helping, which is a pattern of handing over your responsibility to others and externalizing your power to an external authority. So just saying like, oh, somebody else is doing the hard work, let me give them money. Sometimes that works, but I would encourage people to get involved in whatever organization or individual they're giving money to. Get involved so you actually have a chance to understand what's happening there. But that's not the only way to help. I think like something that I tell everyone is, if you're looking at a survivor or a victim or somebody who you suspect might be, ask them directly, what can I do to help you? Is there anything I can do to help you? And listen to them, and then maybe even brainstorming with them and fulfill what is within your capacity at that time. So, it doesn't mean like it's just do what you can, but go directly to the victim and ask them what they need. And that's also, their needs can change from one day to the next. So it's not like, okay, I gave you help one day, you're all set, or I'll just continue with this line of help. Continually check in with what they need. Just the point is to be hands-on, because it's a moral matter, it's a character matter, rather than being passive and trying to claim that makes you a good person. To build your moral character, it really has to be hands-on.
Yes.
Also, to run from that point, in that when people donate to these huge charities, what they often don't realize, unfortunately, is that these charities very, very often, especially in the UK, nearly all of them have their funding directly paid from the government. So they have vested interest in upholding the coercive control that is happening through central government. They also have a vested interest in a best case scenario, doing a minimal amount of help to not change the very thing that they claim to be changing, because they're profiting off of it. Or in the worst case scenario, if you're talking about deliberate corruption, they are deliberately engineering these scenarios and could actually, in fact, be perpetrators of the very thing that they claim to be helping, which is why if anyone is going to donate to anything, I would strongly advise that you research the links with the charities, find out where they get their funding from, find out who their partners are, and when you have this information, you'll then be able to know what the true agenda is, and also just to listen to survivors' experiences of these charities, because you'll find it's very easy to search the reviews, for example, and you'll have survivors saying what their true experiences are. And also, just to add that this is a collective experience, and it's a psychological trap to deem this us versus them mentality, and this divide mentality of, oh, look at these extreme examples of what these people have been through, that could never happen to me. No, because it's, again, we're talking about power and control, and this is how power and control works. So yes, you have some people who are further along the spectrum, but look at Nazi Germany as a prime example. Nobody believed it. No one believed that this was happening and that this level of corruption and collaboration could be happening in the realms of power, but it did. And people were genocided. People were killed brutally and in the most evil of ways. This is still going on today. This is still happening today. It's just an extension of what happened there is happening today. Groups of people, specific groups of people are being targeted. Even when you look at the police crime and sentencing bill in the UK, for example, this bill criminalizes people who are of traveller origin. It states that you are not allowed to have a traveller lifestyle. That's now a criminal offence in the UK. Why? Because the people who align themselves with the same ideology as in Nazi Germany still hold positions of power. And so even if you just search for it, you'll find interviews with prominent individuals who openly state this, that they believe in these things, that they believe in eugenics, for example. And these are the kind of people that we have in our power structure. And it's not a case of just sitting there passively accepting this dynamic. You have to actually do something physical about it to create a change, which is why, what we're doing as two people might not be a very big thing, but when this becomes a collective movement, this is a huge difference. This is what governments don't want. They don't want communities coming together. They're very much for globalization. They're very much for dependence on government authorities, but we're autonomous beings, like we're sovereign beings. We can do these things for ourselves within our own communities, and community is always the answer to corruption.
Beautiful and well said, both of you. Those points, they're so important to drive home. And I love how eloquently you guys broke those down, because they're such big concepts for people that are so new to this to understand, that it's when you actually look at how these stories are constructed and the networks and all the connections and how much deliberate intention goes into keeping you guys slaves however they possibly can. You can see why people say that's too crazy to ever happen. I can't believe that, because it literally threatens every single thing that we've been taught to know about the world. It conflicts with every belief that's been instilled within us since we were little, And so understanding this is so important. And for you guys, even, you had I freaked out the other day. I saw Rachel went live, and you guys had a really horrific incident the other day that was really scary. I'd love for you guys to touch on that so people can understand like what they do to do this coercive control and the different intimidation tactics and things that they do to you consistently.
And well, I went live because it happens so often. I know that's your best way of protection. So we get a knock at the door of the accommodation we're staying at. It was not expecting anyone. We just thought it was the person we were renting from. I opened the door and it's the police. So we were both very caught off guard, which is one of the reasons why it was so triggering for us. But I know my reflex, because like my one reflex that stayed in place was, you film it with multiple cameras and you go live. And so Serenity, do you want to tell what the police were there for, what happened?
Yeah, so just to give a background, so it was in part to do with my case. So my case existed with social services, where they were creating this narrative that I was still being trafficked, while simultaneously restricting my movements, restricting my freedom of movement, trying to coercively control me to not return to my country of origin. You know, I did visit on one occasion, and I was being threatened with court constantly, even though I updated them of my whereabouts. I gave them every piece of information to prove that no, I'm not being trafficked, I'm absolutely fine. You know, so I reached a point where I had had enough of all of it, of everything that we were experiencing as a family, and I decided to return to my country of origin to search for private rentals. I informed them. I even tried to involve them in process. Actually, I had a meeting with them, and I went through every single statutory point, every lawful point, every opinion, you know, as to why it was in the best interest of my child to do that. They refused to cooperate with me. So I then went and I looked for private rentals of my own accord, gave them every possible update. This was blocked because the private rental system in the UK is extremely hard to get on board with when you're a lone parent, unless you're like, you know, two full-time professionals on a high income. It's very hard to private rent, which forced me to go to local government in another area and self-present. So as a result of my actions of doing what I did, there was a repercussion. So that same day when I self-presented, which I gave them all the information for, they were updated.
Self-presenting means?
Yeah, so self-presenting means making a homelessness application to local government to obtain government housing or private housing through the government initiating process, because they essentially now, local government essentially acts as a broker for anyone who doesn't fit the remit of a very high income. So I presented as homeless. I explained to them the discrimination that my family was experiencing in Scotland. I had evidence at my disposal. I couldn't give them all of it. I gave them some of it. They then contacted Scotland. You know, everything was done in a way that I was very, very transparent of what was going on. The police then turned up unannounced at our Airbnb property, completely unannounced and spontaneous. And when I asked them why they were there, they couldn't give me an answer initially. They were trying to be evasive of my question, and they just kept on saying, well, we need to see if you're okay. Are you okay? And my first instinct was, right, well, I'm going to bring my child to the door, because I know that from statutory involvement, all they actually need to do is see the child. Like, that's the only thing within their remit. They don't need to do anything further. They just need to establish the child is okay. So I did that. And I continued to ask them, you know, why are you here? And they said, well, it's a welfare check. And we've been told that the local authority, the social services in Scotland, lost contact. To which point I said, that's not true. That's fraudulent. That didn't happen. I can evidence this. I have the email correspondence right here. The police officer didn't want to engage in this conversation. He was just pushing forward with, we need to see in the property, is there somebody in the property with you? And again, at this point, I'm extremely confused and quite shaken up, because I thought they were going to initiate an emergency removal of my child. And I said, you know, obviously no one's in the property. Why do you want to come and view the property? Like, I'm absolutely fine. What's the problem? I'm more upset that you are here and you're not telling me why you're here. And this is an extremely, you know, extreme action to be doing to a victim, someone that you claim is a victim. You're turning up as a police officer at my door as if I'm a criminal. You know, what's going on here? What are you trying to enforce? Was my stance. he just continuously kept pressing, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" I said, "Yes, I'm absolutely fine." To which point he then asked to have your name, which I didn't consent to, because obviously that's not my data to be sharing. I asked you. You came down and spoke to him. He then said that despite the fact that I'd explained to him over and over again through not only my presentation, but my body language and my words, all explained, I'm fine. You know, my child was fine. My child displayed this. That was what needed to be established. He still said, "Oh, well, some people are under duress."
So they asked for me to come. Well, they asked for my name. And so I went to kind of I came to the door to kind of placate them. And I was going to give a fake name, but Serenity's child was calling out my name. So I gave him my first name. And then they started to divulge Serenity's information to me about the situation with social services. Now, granted, she shared it with me, but they did not have that right.
No.
So in the UK, you have the GDPR, which is, help me out, what's that stand for?
General Data Protection Regulation.
So it's data laws. So it's very stringent about the sharing and provision of data. And so they breached GDPR laws telling me about that. And I told them, this isn't my business. You don't really have a right to be sharing this with me. And then they said, and I said, you know, she's told you that she's okay. And they told me some people can be under duress. So saying that they suspected she was under duress. And obviously there's a lot of logical flaws in this. Well, going to what Serenity was talking about, they claimed that she had lost contact with social services. She broke that contact. Well, then how did the police know where to come? And there were a lot of other specifics to that, but I don't want to share for security reasons. And then also, like, what about the whole situation? Like, as Serenity said, that's not how you would treat someone who you suspect could be currently trafficked. And then what about me? So I'm a petite young female. I mean, not that young, in my 30s, but I'm a female here with her. If she's being trafficked, what would that mean about me? Am I the perpetrator or am I a victim? Why did they show no interest in either? And then so I just said, my name is Rachel, and that's all I'm happy to say. I don't want you to be sharing Serenity's information with me. And they said, okay, and just walked away. And that was that. So that's not how a legitimate police visit would work out. So this was harassment. It was intimidation. And an intended raid. They wanted to enter the property, and who knows what would have transpired from that.
Yeah, because the thing is as well is that obviously throughout my case, my data has been breached repeatedly. Fraudulent information has been submitted, which is another reason why I didn't admit access, because like you say, you don't know what will then happen with what is recorded from that visit after they go into the property. That anything could have been said, you know, so you don't. And also, like, to highlight, at that stage I was completely unclear of whether or not they were trying to force some kind of emergency removal of my child. So of course I'm not going to let you in my property, because that then gives not legal necessarily if they don't have a warrant, but it gives them more legal remit to enforce that removal, because you're policed through consent. So if you open the door to a police officer or an officer of the state, you are giving them your consent, which then leads to more brutality and more harassment. So that's another reason why I didn't let them in. But another point I wanted to highlight about that harassment is it's just so clearly a method of intimidation, because if they truly, the social services in Scotland truly believed that my family or that I was being sex trafficked, or that I was under duress or under coercive control, they would not have actively blocked me from obtaining housing in my country of origin, where I have more support, where I have access to a lot more to help and facilitate our family. If I was in such a vulnerable state, blocking me from housing would have led me right to my trafficker. And not just that, but if they were that concerned that I was being trafficked, if they genuinely felt the way that they felt, why did they not go about it in the lawful way? Why did they not contact the police, issue a search warrant, and then enable access to the property? Because if you, I've seen this happen, you know, from when I was overtly sex trafficked. I've seen raids happen. Raids are not conducted like that. Raids are conducted where the police literally just go straight into the property and they say, this is a raid, right? They then take the trafficking victim to one side and they speak to them then and they say, are you safe? You know, are you well? Do you want to disclose anything to us? They don't go to the door and go, are you safe? Are you well? Can we come in, to a supposed victim? Because that's going to then put that victim in at more risk. You know, I mean, that's just so ridiculous, because if there was really a trafficker in the property, what do you think is going to happen to me and my child by you turning up and doing things the way that you did? You know,
clearly these weren't legitimate police. I mean, they have been given authority and power, but they were corrupt. And so this is a pattern. You know, we've both been trafficked by police. And so the incident, which happened on Friday, the 13th of this month, which is a satanic ritual day, that's streamed live. That's available on my YouTube channel. And I've also streamed live another time that corrupt police were called on me by an Airbnb host / landlord who was trafficking me by means of that's proxy with that's proximity, being a landlord. And it's so obvious that it was not, and nothing about that was legitimate. They did not follow procedure in any way. I disclosed being a victim of trafficking to them, and they told me that I was lying and rolled their eyes. The one officer's literally, it's on camera, he's picking his fingernails as I'm disclosing human trafficking. And they have a legal duty, obviously, to respond to that criminal report, and in the UK, to make a referral into the National Referral Mechanism, the NRM. I brought up the NRM when they claimed that I was lying and making it up as an excuse to defend myself against the allegations that were made against me. I told them I was in the NRM. Why don't you contact the Home Office to check that, to corroborate that? And they pretended like they did not know what the NRM is. And they absolutely did. And that has happened multiple times. In fact, just last night, I was showing Serenity a video from my archives from 2019 or 2020, actually, of police coming, claiming basically, they didn't say the words welfare check, but they said, we've gotten a report that you're mentally unwell. And they forced their way into, first they physically assaulted me in multiple ways, like even hitting me when I'm literally just standing there completely passive, hitting me, dragged me into my property, joined me in my property, unwelcomed against my will, and then interrogated me and were spying on me through my bedroom window, claiming, oh, they believe that I might be harming myself, even though I haven't exhibited any of that behavior. So none of this is in, like, people don't necessarily understand that there is specific legal protocol for, like, you can, like, at the time, I didn't know a lot about the Mental Health Act in the UK. So I didn't know exactly what my rights were. I just knew that this was wrong and it didn't make logical sense. And so I was defending myself from that point of view. And then Serenity last night was highlighting to me how specifically it was breaking the law. And so the part that I got on camera that Serenity viewed was they said, okay, well, we don't know that you're not hurting yourself. We've got to report that you're unwell. But you know what? Show us your ID and we'll be on our way. That's what they had told me before they dragged me into my property. They were like, okay, well, maybe you're not exhibiting mental health imbalance or anything, but we don't know that you're here legally. We need to see your ID. Wait, what?
When there's been no crime.
Yes, there's been no crime. You can't go around to random people and say, prove to me you have your rights to exist here. And it was an intimidation, and it was a program for me, because it was after the Home Office had broken contact with me. I had an asylum seeker ID that hadn't expired yet, but I fled the government housing for destitute asylum seekers. And because the Home Office, like I didn't have that correspondence with the Home Office, they could have easily twisted it around to say that I was guilty of something, that this was all of my doing, and that I was basically a rogue asylum seeker with criminal intent, because that's the asylum system is used to funnel in criminals. Supposedly they're very they're looking for that. They're very careful in monitoring for that. Criminals using the asylum system, terrorists using the asylum system. So it's on camera even that I tell them. So after they say, okay, you're mentally unwell, but show us your ID and we'll be on our way. And no, you're not exhibiting any symptoms, but show us your ID and we'll be on our way. And I did. And then it was just an interrogation. And then they said, okay, well, we have to call the Home Office to make sure you're here legally, because this is an ID, but we don't know that you're here legally still. And so that was intimidation, because I had no idea what the Home Office would say. At that point in time, like I was basically hiding from the government at that point in time. And I was certain that I was going to be detained and deported and possibly arrested, because there's detaining of an immigrant, which, like an undocumented or illegal immigrant, which is very prison-like. It's technically not prison, but most of these places are run by G4S or Serco, these security companies that there's so much information about the corruption and the murder of the immigrants, who are the companies murdering them in the detainment centers. But additionally, they could have created charges against me and arrested me, because that is their pattern of behavior with me, and then deported me either way. So this was all harassment and intimidation. And I did tell them, as soon as I gave them my ID, I said, I am a victim of trafficking. I didn't even say survivor. I said, I'm a victim of trafficking, which means present. And they said, oh, well, you need to tell us that because it's a crime. I said, well, I don't feel it's your business. They said, well, it's a crime. But yet they never said anything to that at all after that. It was completely dropped. And then I was interrogated and just all this gaslighting just to twist me up. And I was being trafficked by the landlord, who was also an Airbnb host, who they knew. They said that they knew, and they were friends with her. And so this is on camera. And so that's just an example of, this corrupt police controlling our lives. And so even, just the other day when they came for Serenity, they were also asking for my identity, putting me back in a very similar circumstance to a previous occasion. And it's, you're always at risk. It's serious.
Yeah, and it's so common that in the UK that the Mental Health Act is misused. This has happened to so many people who don't know the remit of the Mental Health Act. And also after COVID happened, the Coronavirus Act extended the powers of the Mental Health Act. So you can actually have someone's section now much easier in the UK, because you only need one professional's opinion, whereas before I think it was 2 or possibly 3 opinions to section someone. Now it's very easy. And just to highlight that particular case, when we were reviewing the footage, it's just so shocking because they don't even define the remit as to why they were doing what they're doing. So they were saying that you were displaying
they got a call which alleged
strange
that
behavior.
I was displaying strange behavior, waving my legs in the air. Somebody called them and told them that, and that's why
you were doing yoga.
I wasn't. I do yoga, and that's why they said that. But on that occasion, I was literally just sitting there reading a book. I was actually sick with COVID, literally almost died from COVID. That was like day 2 into COVID, and I didn't know. This was before everyone knew about the pandemic. It was in January of 2020, but I was sick, and you can tell that in the video how sick I was. I was literally just sitting under a tree reading a book. But because I do yoga outdoors, they were like, oh, we know that's how to get into her head. Tell her she's strange and weird and ill because she's moving.
But the point I'm making is that if they can do this to you, they can do it to anyone. They can misuse powers to anyone. The Mental Health Act is supposed to be very clear cut. If somebody's displaying behaviors that pose a risk to themselves or others, a risk to the public or a risk to themselves, i.e. doing something crazy like wielding a weapon or wielding a knife, yes, then you can be detained under the Mental Health Act. But even then, there has to be a substantial burden of proof in able to do that to someone, and also to use force and restraint. You
They did
can't
restrain
just,
me.
yeah, you can't just restrain a citizen when you're not using a power of arrest or a police power. It's not down to an opinion. You're supposed to be operating under the law, not an opinion. But policing, especially in the UK, has now become about opinions. You know, why have I had a police officer turning up for a welfare check? That's not a criminal matter. That's a civil matter. The social services in Scotland contacted the local social services. This is what the police relayed to me. And they were told, no, we're not coming out. I wonder why they didn't want to come out. Perhaps because the evidence threshold wasn't met. So what then happened was social services in Scotland contacted the police with hearsay, because they have no evidence to substantiate their claims, because it's not true. And because the police are operating under the remit now of hearsay, and not the law and not criminal stuff, they then visited on a civil matter, which is why it was all about, you know, can we do this or can we do that? But I don't want to have a conversation with a police officer about that. What I want to know is, why are you here? What powers are you using? What's the allegation? Be transparent and clear, not just standing at my door intimidating me. You know, it makes no sense. And if they can do this to me, or if they can do this to Rachel, they will, and they can do it to others. I've seen it happen to so many people, and not people who are, you know, really far down the spectrum of these experiences, just everyday average people this happens to, because the powers that they have been given through the police or through government authorities is so vast now, and they're just constantly making up these really vague thresholds. The thresholds are becoming more and more vague, you know, and no one's pushing back really so much against this, which is why I just feel compelled to highlight that this isn't just an individual experience that we're having. This is, everybody's going through this, and it will expand. It's not a case of if, it will expand.
And think about the individual, like think about the officers as individuals. If they're doing that to us, certainly they're going to do that to other people. Just like any perpetrator, they never have one victim. So these are the public officers. These are the officers who are dealing with the public, who you may encounter.
Yeah.
100%. Not to mention, we know that a lot of, I'm not going to say the word on here, but we know a lot of police officers, people in authority, they're part of brotherhoods, and they swear oaths that come above the law, that they, you know, they're continuously, their allegiance is to those brotherhoods and to those oaths, not to the ones that they take to be in these public office jobs that they're taking, such as police and government and all of that, you know? And so for you guys, like, what's going on right now? So what do you guys need right now? What's going on right now? And how can we rally people around to help you? Because this is, I care so deeply that you guys get some type of consistency, because it's, I can't imagine what it's like being in your shoes. I know that from my own perspective, like, I'm on edge every day, wishing that you guys were here so I could do something to help. I feel so helpless that you guys are across the country, and it frightens me of the repercussions of what they're doing to you guys and what can happen. And I want everybody listening to understand what you're going through and to be inspired and motivated to help in some way, shape, or form. And I'd love for you guys to talk about what you're struggling with, what you need, and how people can help, and how we can start to get you guys on a more consistent level financially and even just emotionally, because I know it's got to be so stressful dealing with this every day.
So there are things that that individually, like we need systems that we need to work through, Serenity and I, that are different. But there is that shared experience of the destitution and homelessness, which makes these systems that we have to navigate very, very dangerous. And so, I mean, at the very basic level, literally going hungry and homeless without shelter, we are every single day struggling to feed ourselves and to have a roof over our heads. And we are for an extended period of time basically lurching from day to day. And then barely being able to survive, how are you going to do anything else? How are you, like, you're physically and mentally and energetically and emotionally handicapped. You can't actually do the things that you need to do to keep yourself safe. It's like very bare minimum that you have to focus on. And we have to work something that's, we're defending ourselves against an expansive network of organized abuse. So do you want to say about what you're needing to do in the immediate with your situation?
Yeah, I just want to summarize as well as the immediate need that what's so frustrating for me individually is that I know that my experiences of what I went through are not for no reason, and that, the work that I was doing for many years in the third sector, my lived experience, which I've now been kind of blocked from because of defamation, because I'm being accused of being currently sex trafficked. That's where my experience lends to. That's where the change sits, because I know that there's a huge gap in systems, and I'm not blaming every single professional and saying every professional is corrupt. Of course they're not. Corruption doesn't even work like that. Corruption is that most people are not even aware that it's going on. It operates under the radar. People are ignorant. The whole purpose of what I wanted to do was to break through that denial barrier that professionals have, to enable collaboration and to bridge that gap with peer experience. So, that's something that I want to do, but I can't do that if my resources are constantly under attack. So short-term goal would be to obtain secure housing, very simply. And how do we obtain secure housing? Well, it has to be separate from the government, because every time my housing is being sourced via the government, that leads me into entrapment over and over again. So something as very simplistic as obtaining, like a caravan or a tiny house or a boat, something that I can physically own, that is mine, that is a base that I can then expand upon, because my goal isn't really an individual goal. It is always a collective goal. I always want to, branch out so that what I went through doesn't go to waste. I didn't go through hell and come out the other end of it to just waste away and not help other people. Like, I went through that for a reason. And this is why, both of us are under so much opposition, because what we lend and the experiences that we've had are important. Like, this is what's making the change. So short term, yeah, obtaining something substantial, something separate from the government, and long-term goal would be to create some kind of a community. My vision for it is always open and ever changing, but essentially it's about independence. It's about housing separate from the government and sovereignty, and also, for when we're talking about collective movements, for the public in general to understand what their sovereignty is. Because when we're talking about natural law or common law, this can't work in isolation, because when you're up against powers, it doesn't work. It doesn't matter how much you know your rights. When you're one person on your own, nobody cares. You have to do it as a collective force. So it's about educating people and coming together and educating each other even on our rights, and enforcing our rights in a peaceful way.
And I'm obviously, like, an immediate need is that includes financial resources, financial supports, because, like, this isn't a hole that we can dig ourselves out of on our own in these circumstances. For the past like week and a half, I've barely eaten and I've been very physically and mentally unwell. And also moving around so much because now I'm having, my Airbnb was restricted for fraudulent purposes or a fraudulent reason. And that was all I had left. I don't have an ID. I'm criminalized by the government. I'm held captive in a foreign country. Doesn't matter that that I'm from the US and I'm in the UK, and both countries speak English, and they're Western countries. So potato, potato, like, I don't think people understand. I am held captive in a foreign country with none of my rights, no ID. And so my only way out is with a solicitor to repair my immigration status, whether that's with a discretionary leave to remain, which would probably be easier than asylum because any asylum seeker is treated like a criminal actually, and there's a lot of political motivations not to grant asylum to a US citizen, but I do need a solicitor, an immigration solicitor, because I tried to take on the government by myself and that didn't work. So I'm basically like in hiding until I can get a solicitor. And even though I'm public about everything, they don't touch what I'm exposing publicly because that would automatically incriminate them. But I'm incriminated by the government. Sorry, I actually lost my train of thought. But and I think this is a good example of like of trauma manifesting. Like, we put on our brave faces for the camera. I mean, for me, because I talk about this publicly so frequently for so long, it's like automatic. Like, I just switch over to basically a different part of myself who is strong enough to talk about this in a mostly coherent way. But this is our brave faces for the camera. We are in serious distress. And so I need a solicitor so that I can have my legal rights. And I do intend to pursue legal justice, whether it is civil or criminal action. I know, just like Serenity was talking about, her purpose in all of this, I know that God did not put me in those safe houses and torture me in isolation in prison camps for almost 2 years for no reason. I collected evidence while I was there. I examined the system and how it worked. I examined the mind control programs. I examined everything and I documented as much as I could and have so much evidence. And I just don't ever have the opportunity to publish it on my own, given everything. It takes a lot of work to organize all of that and put it out. I put some out and it's very compelling. But and people think that the solution, because when I say I'm held captive in a foreign country, they're like, okay, Rachel needs to go back to America. The problem started in America. I was born into this from America. And the fact that I've made an asylum application and the application was allowed by the UK, because they don't have to allow it. But the fact that I made an asylum application inherently presents that I'm not safe in the US. So here's the thing, obviously, like the danger doesn't leave you no matter where you go. So it's not like I'm here because I think I'll be safer here. I'm here to expose things. Like, I was coerced into claiming asylum. I didn't really have a plan, but everything was a mess. And now I know my path, though. I don't know how it will manifest, but I know I'm here to expose things and to provide that evidence. I can't provide for myself without a solicitor repairing my immigration status so I can have my rights back and be here in the country with basic human resources.
And another thing too, I want to touch on with both of you, but with you piggybacking off what you're saying, Rachel, for people who are like, why doesn't she just go get a lawyer? Okay, for one, a lawyer requires fees. And for two, Rachel has been trying. There are no lawyers who will represent a human trafficking survivor, especially because a lot of lawyers are in the systems and they are aware of who else is in the systems. And they are also coerced to keep people in the systems, and they deliberately do not represent human trafficking victims who have these backgrounds. It is a very tight-knit network, and a lot of these people sit in these positions of power that we rely on to help us out of really hard situations. So I just want to bring that up. And that's the same for Serenity too. It is very, very hard for one to get any type of representation, even sometimes to just talk to a lawyer on the phone. They will charge you for just an initial call to speak with you. And this can be hundreds of dollars just for an initial call. And if you don't even have money to live for the day, if you can't even feed yourself, that's not an option. Not to mention, you can go knock on as many doors as you want, and you won't even get that one call of somebody wanting to represent you. And as you're hearing, these are very, very, very in-depth and complicated and complex stories. You would think a lawyer would jump on this to help, but this is across the board. If you guys have been listening, you hear this time after time after time after time, whether you're a mother, whether you are an observer, helping, an ally, whether you are an actual survivor. This is consistent across the board, that people who whistleblow, that who ask for help, who expose, they are blocked out of being capable of getting help, and they're blocked from being able to get people to help somebody that they know. So I just want to touch on that, because I know that that's probably running through some people's minds, and I don't want people to think that that wasn't also your first option to do. And I know you've both tried all different options to make that happen, and it's just not, it's not an option, unfortunately, just like how going to the police isn't, for many of you, which is really, really unfortunate.
And nonetheless, I do believe that there is help out there. Like, I believe that there is at least one lawyer who is meant to help and who would be willing to help, who has rights to help, someone who isn't corrupt. just like I'm not the only genuine good intentioned survivor. I know that there, on the opposite side of things, there are also lawyers who are genuine and good intentioned, even if they're not the majority of what makes up that's profession, but they do exist.
Yes. And if people are listening, and if you know somebody that would be willing to even just listen, pass this episode to them, or ask them if they'd be willing to just take a quick call or an email. And that alone would be so appreciated, just to have some type of resources that we could pass on to them, for somebody just to even listen, because that doesn't happen. I totally believe that too. I think that there's help in all aspects, but I think it's the same. I think those people are isolated, they're shunned, and they're not given the ability to have their own voice heard, to say, hey, I'm here. So they're also people that don't grow in their communities. They're people that don't make, they're not afforded the means to have billboards and to have ways of reaching people. I think they're very much targeted like a survivor is, if they're trying to help. But that's where these pieces come in handy, is if we can start, it's a big puzzle, and you two are two pieces, a lawyer's another piece. There's pieces floating all over the world. It's just, we need to find them and resource them and connect.
Yeah, and also I just wanted to say, with regards to my situation, because I'm constantly being accused of being under duress and coercion from the very people who are putting me under coercion and duress. Every time I have to move from one accommodation to another, that then strengthens their false narrative, because they're saying, oh, you're being trafficked. So it really is paramount, really within the next few days, that I secure somewhere at least a little bit more permanent to prevent the removal of my child, because the further along legitimizing their false narrative they get, the closer they get to their goal. They've now put in 2 fraudulent reports to the police. Those reports will have a reference number and are logged on an official database, which creates a false narrative. So it's like the gap is getting smaller as time goes on. And then with reference to solicitors and lawyers, I find that I've been searching for one for nearly a year now, and every single time I get gatekept, I have paid also for a consultation, and the advice that I was given was terrible. I could have searched this advice myself, and I find that most solicitors, no one wants to specialize in human rights law unless they're a gatekeeper, or if they do, they get pushed down and they get pushed out of the network. when really the overlaps between both our experiences is human rights law. It's fundamental. And yes, of course, we need someone who specializes in different areas like family law, immigration law, etc., or housing. Yes, that's important. But what keeps happening is that we keep coming up against these ones who only specialize in family law, for example, and that field is pitted against people because it's statutory in nature, it's legalese. So anything to do with legal will not work in favor of the oppressed. It works in favor of those with power. So you need to actually have someone whose scope is human rights, who then filters that down through the legislation, secondary to that.
Thank you so much for that. And for people listening, how can people contribute? I think financially is the biggest. So if you guys have finances, you guys can start chipping away at these things to have more consistent housing, to have food to eat, and then gradually to be able to afford help when it comes along, and things like that. So how can people contribute to you, and how can people connect with you? What are all the different ways that we can help resource you?
I think that we can definitely provide links as well, like links to our individual channels where we'll upload updates, etc. We can put all of that in there. We'll provide a link to a fundraiser as well once we get that set up. And also just to highlight, it's not that we're asking people to make a donation and then that's it. Of course it's within everybody's choice. You do what you want. If you feel like you're only comfortable donating a small amount, or if you can only do a small amount, that's fine, but you're still being part of process. Or if you want to be someone who comes along with us for the whole journey of this, that's amazing. Like if you feel like maybe you can only donate a small amount every once in a while, but to be part of it, you're actually putting your energy into process. You're part of the change. You're being a part of this community. So we want to involve people to the point that they're also an equal component in this. And whatever anyone's in a position to give in the here and now is obviously massively appreciated, because it gets us a platform, so that we can then expand.
But yeah, we do need to and want to create a community movement. Like this is a movement. Like we said, neither of us is in this just for ourselves and just for our own survival. We're here to make a change. We've been blessed to be in this position to be able to make a change, but we won't actually be able to follow that through without everyone's support and without everyone getting involved, because a community movement is not comprised of two people. It's comprised of everyone, obviously. And yes, like the financial contributions will get us out of the immediate survival risk, but it might, if we don't move further with an actual movement, then we will continuously have our survival at risk. We will be in this, yes, we will be in a cycle. We will be in that loop. But so for the time being, Serenity and I are pooling our resources with any donations, and we will have a GoFundMe set up, we'll have a GoFundMe set up in the next couple of days. But for right now, people can donate directly to PayPal, which will get to us quicker with through a trusted friend, a woman named Crystal, actually, who I've had interviews on my channel, and she actually just interviewed me recently about the asylum system. So she's another person who is helping us out a lot, and that was her PayPal there. So people can send their contributions directly there until we get a GoFundMe up, and we will update people when that GoFundMe is up.
Perfect. I think even just people watching and following your YouTubes, having eyes on survivors is huge too. It's a form of protection, and I don't think many people, look at it like that. But the more in public somebody is, it's just like how a celebrity can't go anywhere without people saying, oh, that's who this is. When more people have eyes on these survivors and something does happen, now it's not like Rachel's very clever handle on a lot of her social media is no witness, because that's literally what a survivor's life is. They're the witness of their life, and there's not anybody else that sees what they do. There's not anybody else that goes through what they do, and that's by design. So if we can take no witnesses and bring in hundreds and thousands and millions of witnesses to see what's actually going on, and to say, oh, you're gonna mess with these girls, well, guess what, we're watching you too. That is a form of protection for these men and women who are going through these really hard times. And that can be as simple as subscribing to their YouTube channel, get their views up, get their boosts up. So when people go stalk them and look on social media, they're scared to mess with them because they know how many people are following them. Donate resources financially. They need that. This is dire, you guys. Like, I can't tell you how much it affects me every day to know that, like, I'm all the way across the country. I'm only one person and I don't have all the resources that they need, and I can't provide that. Like, I wish I could do that myself. I know Becky feels the same way. Becky's been involved and she's been helping donate and has been such an angel throughout all this, you know, but this isn't something that just happens because a couple of people decide to help, and it's not just going to fix itself. Like, if we want to make a difference with human trafficking, and if we want to make a dent in this, we have to go straight to the source, and we have to say, just like how we were talking about earlier, how can I help you? Not an organization that says they're going to help you, not the government. How do we bypass that and create our own system where we are resourcing survivors directly? We are helping them on a one-on-one basis, and we know exactly where our money is going to them. And this is the best way that you can do that. Forget all those human trafficking organizations, unless it's run by a survivor. I will never trust it. So please, please, please connect with them. Go follow them. Keep eyes on them. If that's all that you can do, donate $1, donate $5. A little bit goes such a long way in these circumstances. And it's not something that we take lightly to have your help with that. And the sooner that we do that, or the sooner that we get them a resource that's willing to listen, as soon as somebody knows somebody who knows somebody that can help, we start slowly digging these girls out of these situations, and we start creating a system that doesn't exist right now. We break out of the matrix of what does exist, and we start bringing forth our own way to help this movement and to bring light to what's actually going on in the world. So I really encourage everybody to please help however you can, even if that just is subscribing on their YouTube channel, listening to their testimonies and sharing it with a friend, sharing it on your channels, however that is. All those little things go further than you could ever know. And Becky, go ahead.
If I can add to that as well, just to clarify for people that, you know, I have a YouTube and a BitChute channel. There's been like 20 videos removed from YouTube. I've had a lot of issues with that, but everything's on BitChutes. But also all my whistleblowing content moving forward, at least in the near future, will only be available on Patreon to encourage that activism and involvement and support, rather than like exploiting myself and killing myself getting this stuff out there without any without it being reciprocated, right? And yeah. And without being able to sustain myself. And so they can find new content on my Patreon. And I also work for myself, like, despite, you know, for me to survive, I claim my sovereignty. And I realized I had to break out of the government system. The government told me I'm prohibited from working. Okay, so you want me to kill myself then? Because that's like, I would die. I would die under their control. Already tried that route, very close to dying. So I do work for myself. I've worked for myself since 2015 or 2016. I'm a shaman, I'm a healer. I specialize in intuitive counseling, which includes trauma integration and MK Ultra deprogramming, identifying and navigating narcissism, which is so prevalent, and recovering from narcissistic abuse. So that's just some of the specialties, but then of course I can support anything in between. And that is my life, part of my life purpose. That's what activates my light. So it's a service to me even to be able to do that. And at the same time, that gives me the financial stability so that the constant trauma and dire situations cease to be a 5-alarm threat all the time. So, I mean, it's one of those things that's mutually supportive. And so I just want people to know that I'm perfectly at that capacity to have that capacity to lend my services. And that would actually be one or at least a partial solution to my circumstances.
Yes, because that would be consistent income coming in for you. And Rachel, where can people contact you, or where can they find you or learn about your services?
So my services are detailed from my Facebook page at it's at Divine Recalibration, or just facebook.com/divine recalibration. But we can use my link tree, which just links everything. My whistleblowing content, my spirituality content, and healing services are all available on that single page.
Perfect. And
I'll make sure to put that on our website as well.
yes, and I really encourage people, like, hire a survivor. That's also such an amazing thing that you can do. Like, reach out to them and say, hey, I heard you have this skill and I could use it. Serenity too. Serenity has so many different skills, and if we can resource them that way, and you can resource them for something that you're already doing, if you're doing intuitive healing with somebody, or if you are thinking about it, go to Rachel and get it instead and help support her. And she has an incredible Patreon that she does, and she gives you so much for such a small value. And that little bit too, the more people get on board with that, it's like those little things, they just build up and they help create a job in a sense when they're not able to go get one in the way that most people can. So we're providing them with consistent pay because we're paying for services that they have to offer, which is also so beautiful. And Serenity, what about you also?
Yeah, and I mean, like you say, it's very expansive, and these are transferable skills that not everybody has at their disposal. And again, like I currently haven't been able to work for some time because of the defamation, and because of the restraints that's put on me with childcare as well, with the homelessness. So it makes it difficult, but I will be setting something up once I can secure at least some kind of rental and a little bit of a base. I'll then definitely be setting something up. I offer consultancy services to both survivors and to frontline providers, NGOs, charities in general, of like genuine charities who really do want to make a difference and create a structural change, from my lived experience. Also, I offer workshops around creative writing, because I'm also a writer. I do, I can do one-on-one sessions with people. I'm very open, with regards to the direction that it will take me. So I would just say to people, just reach out, or just go onto my YouTube channel, and all of the updates will be put on there as this evolves, and expands into something bigger. Because yes, what I did before took off very well. Like, I had a lot of good feedback and a lot of support in what I was doing, but it got very quickly squashed, and I don't want that to be the continuation. I want it to be a lesson learned and a reason to go around that obstacle and find something better, actually.
100%. And I'm going to put as many links as I can below. These girls are on multiple social media platforms, and they offer very generously many ways to be in contact with them. And as you guys will see on the screen, this is the PayPal account. If you're listening and you're not on YouTube, if you're on PayPal, you can donate, and I'll have this down in the show notes too. It is Crystal, CHRYSTAL 459@gmail.com is where you can send your donations directly to them. And we will have more information of a fundraiser that has a little bit more information for you guys to look through, and that will be theirs that they do. So we'll link that up too as soon as possible. Becky, is there anything else that you wanted to say also?
No, I just really wanted to thank you guys for coming on. I think this is really, really important that people understand that, again, when you get out of the system of trafficking, that you're not out of the system. And it's really, thank you for your bravery for coming on and speaking about this and letting people know, and your vulnerability to allow people to help you. I know it's often not real easy to say, I need some help, and allow people to help. So thank you for allowing us to help you and for others to help you. And please, those listening or watching, if you can, any amount would be great. Like Emma said, if you can go and support them on their social media, through the works that they do, whatever it is, anything would be beneficial now. But again, know that it is part of a process and that it doesn't just end with the $5 you give now. Join the Patreon, join their social media, keep up to date, follow along, be a supportive ear, because sometimes, as we talked about earlier, it's very isolating. And so be able to be that as well. So, but thank you very much, ladies. We really, really appreciate it. We know that it's very early in the morning, I believe, for you over there. So we appreciate you guys staying up and staying on with us.
No, thank you so much for having us on. And also, I just want to say that there's such a obstacle for us as survivors to overcome, in that we are geared towards constantly going to the government for help. You know, that's the default position, is, oh, we'll go to the government, or we'll go to this charity or this organization. And that's not actually the answer. The answer is community. And although it's a vulnerable place to be, to say, actually, I need help, it's actually a very empowering place to be as well, because there is a power in that vulnerability and in that acceptance of, this is where we're at, we need your help. You know, we're not alone in this. I'm sure that we're all equally struggling with our own obstacles, and that we can help each other. That's how it works. You know, when one person is down, another person is up, and vice versa. And that is how it works. It's an exchange.
Absolutely. And I love that you mentioned that, because all of us are conditioned to go ask the government for help, to go ask banks for help. We're resourcing everything from the government, and we don't even think twice about asking them. And these are complete strangers that could have complete control over our lives, because they're involved so much with everything that we do. I think that's important for anybody to think about. Who are you asking for help, whether you're a survivor or not? And how do you bring that into a community form and say, how can we help resource each other? How do I help my community? How do I help my family? How do I help people that actually need help, that are struggling to even get help from the government? How can I give my money there? Or how can I help bring a community around them? You know, I think as a society, we need to get better at asking each other and having genuine conversations, instead of always looking to Big Brother to help us, you know. And I think survivors, like you guys, really, because you've been forced to step out of the matrix long before, and in way worse ways than, you know, us, you've gotten to look at the world in a very different way, and you see how the government impacts everything so negatively, and society's hold on that, you know. And I think we have so much. I wish that you guys could be, and I pray, my wish is that the world is run by survivors one day, because you guys see everything the way that it should be, and you lead with love. You don't lead with the evil, you know, satanic nature that our world is currently run by. You guys lead with love and empathy and community, and truly problem solving the world's greatest issues, you know. And so I encourage everybody, lift survivors up, lift these girls up. Like, you guys have such futures ahead of you, and so much that is, you know, so much on your mission that you still have left to be explored. And as hard as it is, I know both of you were put in the positions that you were, and it's so unfortunate. And I love that you guys are doing something with that and saying, I might be a victim, but I'm not going to be a victim of my story. I am going to do something amazing with my story. And I'm going to make sure that the world is better because of what I went through, and that I'm not passing on this abuse generationally, just like how people came before me. So just like Becky said, I commend you both for that, because I look at you guys and think, I don't know if I could be that way. And I think that that's why I wasn't put in that position. I don't think that I could be as strong as you guys, you know. And I get so much of my own strength, and I know Becky does too from you. It's hard enough for me to be in my situation and get bullied and trolled and have the opposition, you know. And I have so much empathy, because I can't fathom what it's like, you know, going through the little bits that I do every single day, 24 hours a day. And I hope people listening understand that this isn't just, you know, a lot of us can walk away from bullying. We can block people who try to come in our path. Like, survivors don't get that option. They're forced to deal with all the bullying and abuse and all of the coercive control, and they don't have an option or a consent to leave it, to accept it. They're forced into it. So I really appreciate you girls. I love you guys so much. And I'm going to link everything below. I will keep encouraging, and now we have some content. We can make some great videos. I'm going to link all the donation links below. Anything that you guys can do on the other end listening to help is paramount, and it's so encouraged and it's so appreciated in advance for anybody who's listening and feels compelled to help. Serenity,
Thank
did you
you.
want?
Sorry, I was just wanting to say thank you to, well, first, thank you to you and Becky for your supports and, you know, even your donations. And I mean, even Serenity and I at different points on our paths, we've donated to each other or contributed to each other in some way. Like, we can help each other just with whatever capacity you have at the moment, and that capacity might change. But thank you to the viewers also for any supports that they want to lend in whatever way. And thank you for listening, and thank you for caring. You know, if you've gotten to the end of this video and you're hearing this, you've listened, obviously, and hopefully it's because you do care and you want to be a part of making the world a better place rather than just being complacent and complicit to the satanic control and the evil that has control and runs the world. It starts with you. Like, just the current, like, one step at a time from right where you are. None of us ever expected to be in this position where we are today, all of us that are here together. And so it always starts with just one step. So thank you everyone for joining this movement.
Yeah.
You guys all so much. And Serenity, I'd love if you want to close with what I didn't mean to interrupt you. If you could say what you want to say. I was going to see if you wanted to close with a quick prayer too. You do the most beautiful prayers.
I wasn't going to jump into a prayer, but I can do that too. But I was just about to say, like, you know, from a Christian perspective, from the perspective of my faith in general, is that we don't go through this for no reason, because through our testimony, that's how others are saved. That's how others are brought to the light. However you want to view it, it is your personal journey, you know, but coming to a faith and coming to uplifting, that's how it works, you know, because it's through our testimony, and as painful and as awful and difficult, and sometimes it does feel like your soul is dying going through these circumstances. It's a constant being born again, like over and over again, and until, you know, you get to a point where everything really of the world just falls away. All of it just falls away, and there's nothing left but that existence that is within you, that's coming from within you, that is just coming from God. It's like a channel from God, you know. And so I just feel that, yeah, these things happen for a reason. They're horrific, they're traumatic, but we don't stay in it. We don't stay in the trauma, and we don't stay in the experience. We transcend it. So I can pray. God, I just pray now for the viewers. I pray for everyone who's listening to this still. God, I pray that you bring awareness to them of who they are in you, God, and who they are in Christ. I pray that you bring forth recognition of their purpose, God, of their pathway, that they are walking with you. And God, I pray that they follow you in your footsteps, that they pursue righteousness, that they pursue justice, that they pursue truth. Because God, you tell us in your word in Corinthians that love does not rejoice in evil, but rejoices in the truth. God, you tell us this in Corinthians because you're exempling who you are in us, and greater is he who lives within me than that is in the world. So therefore, all of these worldly things, God, that are happening to us, these evil things that are happening to us, they are less than you. You are so far greater than these experiences, God. You are so far greater because you have created everything on this earth. You are the Alpha and the Omega. You are the beginning and the end. You are the creator of everything. You are the same God who led the Israelites out of Egypt and out of the persecution of which they went through in Egypt. And you brought them out into the wilderness, God, which is where we are now with you. Father, we sit with you in the wilderness. We sit with you through our trials and through our persecution, and you are the one that we turn to when we need help. You are the one who saves us. This world will never save us. This world will always forsake us because we are not of this world. We are rather of you. We are born again through you, God. And I just pray now that the listeners who are still here with us, that they feel the presence of your Holy Spirit as I speak. I pray that that Holy Spirit just transcends through us collectively as the body of Christ. I pray now that that Holy Spirit rise up within all of us and bring forth your refining fire and bring forth your spirit for justice and truth. And God, I pray now that the full armor is upon all of us in the coming days, so that this change that you're bringing, this divide of the sea that you're bringing for us as your servants, comes about, and no danger comes before us, in fact. And the Pharaoh who is coming after us, trying to bring us back into slavery, trying to continue this generational slavery, God, that they just fall before us, that the armies of the enemy just drown. Actually, they just drown in the sea. There's nothing left of them. And even though at times we might be fearful, we walk by faith alone, because it's by faith alone that we are saved, not by any of our own understanding, God, but rather in our faith and in our trust in you. And I pray now that the viewers, they don't place their trust in the world. I pray now that you turn from the world, that you turn from worldliness, that you turn from leaning on your own understanding for answers, that you turn from deceptive authorities, even deceptive churches. I pray now for anyone who's listening who is experiencing control through systems posing as faith and posing as an authority. I pray that that is loosed from them in the name of Jesus Christ. I pray that instead of having this authority over them, that they turn to you, because you are the one true authority, God. And you tell us in your word in Ezekiel 21, you tell us that you will overturn these worldly authorities. You tell us you will overturn it, and it shall be no more, because God, none of these worldly authorities will be anymore when you come to be, when your word comes to be, and when your prophecy is spoken over people. This will come to pass. And God, I pray now for a restoration, for your temple of praise to be rebuilt upon this earth, and for every structure that the enemy has placed on this earth to fall down and break apart into ashes, so that your kingdom can come on this earth as it is in heaven. I pray now for your people to come together collectively, because we are all equal components in the body of Christ. And I pray now just for people to feel the ultimate peace of your presence, Lord, especially as we depart from this discussion, and even as people go about their day or go about their sleep, that they just feel your ultimate peace and your presence. Amen.
Thank you for listening. God bless you all, and we will see you next week.